Tonight, we're covering the life and legacy of the legendary leader George Washington. Washington was a courageous, visionary, and steadfast figure who skillfully guided a young nation through its most defining moments, shaping the course of history in ways that continue to inspire people today. So, before we all settle in, take a moment, if you haven't already, to like the video and subscribe to the channel. Also, let us know the time and location from which you're watching. Now let's dive into this remarkable story, and we hope it helps you learn while you sleep. In the soft morning mist of February 22, 1732, a baby boy opened his eyes for the first time at Pope's Creek Plantation in Virginia. George Washington was born into a world bound by tradition, yet bursting at the seams with possibility. He was welcomed by parents Augustine and Mary Ball Washington, who held modest prosperity within the colonial society. Little did they know that their newborn son would become a guiding star in a rapidly changing landscape. The Washington family farm sat gracefully by the Potomac River, surrounded by vast forests and fertile fields. Childhood here was full of explorations and adventures, with young George eagerly absorbing the lessons of nature and discipline. His father Augustine, a dedicated planter and community leader, imparted wisdom of honesty and responsibility through gentle firmness. Yet life had an early lesson of hardship for George. At merely 11, he lost his father, forcing the family into a period of uncertainty. His mother, Mary, strong-willed and resourceful, took charge, instilling resilience and independence in her children. Under her watchful eye, young George learned to balance books, manage land, and maintain his composure in challenging situations. George's education was practical and rudimentary, far from the sophisticated academic life available across the ocean in England. He mastered arithmetic, geometry, and surveying, practical skills that would serve him profoundly in adulthood. George's older half-brother Lawrence, whom he deeply admired, further widened his horizons by introducing him to the sophisticated life at his estate, Mount Vernon. It was through Lawrence that George first glimpsed the broader British colonial world and the looming French threat in the Ohio Valley. As George stepped into adolescence, he quickly outgrew the confines of boyhood games. His physical strength and composed demeanor stood out among peers. Tall and strong, with a quiet seriousness rare among youths his age, George was already marked by neighbors and family friends as someone destined for leadership. His mother's strict moral standards combined with the model of his late father's integrity, forming the solid core of his character. In the gentle evenings spent on the veranda of Mount Vernon, George listened carefully to Lawrence's stories of military adventure and political discussions. These conversations kindled within him a fascination for the broader struggles that shaped their lives and lands. The distant echoes of empire-building wars and the brewing tensions between colonial settlers and Native Americans shaped George's early understanding of the complex world he was entering. Before his 20th birthday, opportunity knocked decisively at his door. The royal governor of Virginia, impressed by George's reputation and surveying skills, appointed him as official surveyor for Culpeper County. Venturing into Virginia's wilderness, George Washington meticulously mapped land claims and navigated delicate negotiations with settlers and natives alike. It was his first taste of responsibility, of the balance between diplomacy and determination. Thus, young George Washington stepped forward, unwittingly on a path that would forever alter history, setting into motion the wheels of destiny. As George Washington moved further into adulthood, the world around him became increasingly complex and contentious. At 21, his career took another significant step when he inherited the Mount Vernon estate after the death of his beloved half-brother, Lawrence. Mount Vernon wasn't just a property. It represented a shift in George's status, propelling him deeper into Virginia's elite society. With it came both prestige and responsibility. The young Virginian quickly became known for his sharp mind and disciplined work ethic. His meticulous surveying reports caught the attention of influential colonial leaders, enhancing his reputation as a reliable and precise professional. However, George wasn't content with merely surveying. He longed for more significant challenges, those that tested his mettle both physically and intellectually. Opportunity knocked again in 1753, when tensions between Britain and France escalated over territorial claims in North America. The British colonial governor selected George to deliver an urgent diplomatic message to French authorities in the Ohio Valley, demanding they abandon their forts and leave British-claimed territory. This journey marked George's introduction to international politics and military operations. Traversing the wilderness was fraught with dangers, harsh weather, treacherous terrain, and threats from hostile Native American tribes aligned with the French. George, displaying resilience and bravery, successfully delivered the governor's message, though the French politely but firmly declined the demand. His detailed accounts of the expedition were widely published and celebrated, earning him widespread respect and admiration among colonists. Shortly thereafter, in 1754, George received his first military commission, tasked with protecting British settlers in the disputed region. With a small force, he established a modest fortification named Fort Necessity. However, his lack of military experience soon became evident. In his first major confrontation, a French force swiftly overwhelmed Fort Necessity, forcing George and his troops into a humiliating surrender. Despite this defeat, George's leadership qualities, his courage, tactical thinking, and unwavering determination, stood out starkly. Rather than diminishing his reputation, the setback at Fort Necessity deepened his resolve and sharpened his military instincts. Washington recognized that failure was a powerful teacher, and he committed himself to studying military tactics, strategy, and leadership. In these trying times, the young commander learned invaluable lessons about humility, preparedness, and perseverance. As conflict between Britain and France intensified into what history would call the French and Indian War, George eagerly joined General Edward Braddock's campaign in 1755. Serving as an aide to Braddock, Washington witnessed firsthand the British Army's vulnerabilities against guerrilla warfare tactics employed by the French and their Native American allies. When Braddock was mortally wounded in a brutal ambush near Fort Duquesne, George stepped forward, courageously organizing a retreat that saved many lives. George Washington emerged from the chaos as a respected leader, ready to shape history further. Following the devastating defeat near Fort Duquesne, George Washington returned to Virginia as a celebrated hero, admired for his bravery and composure under fire. At just 23 years old, he found himself thrust into the spotlight, his reputation significantly enhanced. However, the reality of military life and the ongoing French and Indian War continued to test his leadership and resolve. Recognizing Washington's natural abilities, Virginia's colonial government appointed him commander of the colony's militia, entrusting him with the daunting task of defending the extensive frontier. With limited resources, George tackled the enormous responsibility with vigor. He tirelessly trained troops, built defenses, and strategized ways to protect settlers from relentless raids by enemy forces. His leadership during these turbulent years was marked by persistence and adaptability. Washington consistently argued for better support and resources, becoming adept at navigating the political complexities of colonial governance. While frequently frustrated by bureaucracy, he developed a knack for diplomacy, learning to persuade reluctant officials and motivate discouraged soldiers alike. Throughout this period, George faced ongoing challenges in maintaining morale and discipline among his men. Conditions were harsh, supplies scarce, and the danger ever present. Yet, he never asked more of his soldiers than he was willing to endure himself, earning their deep respect and loyalty. Washington's commitment to duty and his genuine concern for those under his command set him apart as an exceptional leader. Despite his military successes, George felt a growing frustration with the British military establishment. He had hoped for a permanent commission in the British Army, but the British military hierarchy consistently overlooked colonial officers, reserving recognition and promotions for those born in England. This institutional prejudice deeply impacted George, shaping his views on British authority and fueling a sense of American identity distinct from British interests. In 1758, another British expedition targeted Fort Duquesne, aiming to finally wrest control from French forces. George Washington eagerly joined the campaign, driven by a personal desire to correct past failures. Under General John Forbes, the British Army carefully advanced through the wilderness, employing the lessons learned from previous defeats. Washington's strategic insights and leadership were instrumental in ensuring a disciplined and cautious approach. When the British finally reached Fort Duquesne, they found it abandoned by the French, who had retreated to avoid direct confrontation. The British quickly renamed the strategic site Fort Pitt, later to become Pittsburgh. Although this victory came without the battle Washington anticipated, it was a significant strategic triumph. The successful expedition validated George's perseverance and solidified his standing as a prominent figure in colonial society. Returning home, Washington resolved to shift his focus from military life, settling into a more peaceful existence at Mount Vernon. However, fate had other plans. George Washington was about to discover that his greatest challenges and triumphs were yet to come. As George Washington returned to the tranquil surroundings of Mount Vernon in late 1758, he sought peace and stability away from military strife. The estate he inherited had suffered neglect during his prolonged absences, and George quickly immersed himself in the substantial task of restoring and expanding it. This new chapter marked his evolution from soldier to dedicated planter and landowner. Mount Vernon soon flourished under George's attentive management. His meticulous approach to farming and business showcased his keen organizational skills. Washington adopted innovative agricultural techniques, expanding into tobacco cultivation, wheat production, and fishing operations along the Potomac River. These improvements turned Mount Vernon into one of the most successful plantations in Virginia, greatly enhancing his social and economic status. Beyond agricultural achievements, Washington also invested in expanding the estate's infrastructure. He redesigned and enlarged the main house, adding elegant features and spacious rooms to accommodate his increasing role as a local leader and prominent host. Mount Vernon became not only his cherished home but also a gathering place for influential colonial figures and political discussions that would shape the future of America. During this peaceful interval, George found personal happiness in his marriage to Martha Dandridge Custis, a wealthy widow, in January 1759. Their union brought him not only companionship but also an instant family, as Martha had 2 children from her previous marriage. George embraced his role as husband and stepfather, providing stability and warmth that marked their household with comfort and affection. His marriage to Martha introduced George to a broader social network, significantly influencing his views on colonial politics and society. Martha's considerable wealth further solidified Washington's position within Virginia's elite, allowing him to focus more on his community and broader colonial concerns. Together, they balanced the responsibilities of managing their vast estate while nurturing familial bonds. Despite his withdrawal from active military duty, George Washington remained deeply engaged in colonial affairs. His appointment to the Virginia House of Burgesses in 1758 began a long political career marked by quiet diplomacy and thoughtful engagement with critical colonial issues. In Williamsburg, he gained a reputation as a respected legislator whose views held substantial weight. Yet, beneath the tranquility of life at Mount Vernon, tensions were rising between Britain and its American colonies. Washington closely observed developments like the Stamp Act and other contentious taxation measures imposed by the British Parliament, recognizing the brewing unrest among colonists. He actively participated in boycotts and protests, aligning himself firmly with the growing sentiment against British oppression. These formative years at Mount Vernon proved essential in shaping Washington's identity, transforming him from a provincial Virginian into a figure capable of national leadership. His experiences as a planter, legislator, and family man enriched his understanding of both human nature and governance. Unbeknownst to Washington, the peaceful days at Mount Vernon were soon to be disrupted, propelling him once again into the heart of historical events. The calm at Mount Vernon, though cherished by George Washington, was steadily overshadowed by escalating political tensions between the American colonies and Great Britain. Throughout the 1760s, British Parliament enacted numerous measures aimed at exerting greater control over the colonies, triggering widespread resentment. George observed these developments closely, increasingly concerned by their implications for colonial liberty. The Stamp Act of 1765 became a defining moment for Washington. This tax on printed materials, from legal documents to newspapers, ignited fierce protests across the colonies. Washington himself became an outspoken critic of British policies, publicly declaring them unjust and oppressive. He actively supported the colonial boycott of British goods, believing it was crucial for the colonies to assert their rights and economic independence. In 1767, the Townshend Acts further deepened colonial unrest, imposing duties on essential imports like glass, tea, and paper. George, aligned with influential colonial leaders like Patrick Henry and Thomas Jefferson, began corresponding frequently about these troubling developments. His home at Mount Vernon transformed into a meeting place for like-minded individuals committed to resisting British dominance. As tensions escalated, George took on more responsibilities in colonial governance. He became a leading figure in Virginia's House of Burgesses, advocating for colonial rights with measured yet firm arguments. Despite his reserved demeanor, Washington's integrity, clarity of thought, and resolute nature commanded respect, positioning him as a natural leader among his peers. In 1770, the Boston Massacre intensified the sense of urgency among colonial leaders. British troops fired into a crowd of colonists, resulting in several deaths. Although far removed geographically, George Washington felt deeply affected by this tragic event. To him, it represented a dangerous escalation, a stark reminder of the British willingness to suppress colonial dissent with violence. George's political involvement deepened significantly when the British Parliament passed the Intolerable Acts in response to the Boston Tea Party. These harsh measures aimed to punish Massachusetts but instead united the colonies in shared outrage. Washington openly condemned the acts, asserting they represented a deliberate attack on American liberties. His resolve solidified, recognizing that peaceful reconciliation was increasingly unlikely. In 1774, Virginia appointed George Washington as a delegate to the First Continental Congress in Philadelphia, marking his entry onto the national stage. There, he joined influential colonial leaders, including John Adams, Benjamin Franklin, and Samuel Adams, in discussing strategies to resist British oppression. His thoughtful insights and composed leadership quickly gained the admiration of fellow delegates. As the colonies edged closer to armed conflict, Washington maintained a quiet, yet determined readiness. He began organizing local militias, preparing them for potential conflict. Though deeply hoping for peace, he understood that force might become necessary to preserve the freedoms he cherished. George Washington's journey from planter and local leader at Mount Vernon to prominent figure in the fight for American liberty was accelerating rapidly, setting the stage for the monumental events soon to unfold. In April 1775, tensions between Britain and its colonies exploded into open conflict with the battles of Lexington and Concord. The echoes of musket fire reverberated throughout the colonies, instantly altering George Washington's reality. News of these confrontations swiftly reached Virginia, stirring intense emotions among colonists who recognized that the long-feared war had begun. When Washington arrived at the Second Continental Congress in Philadelphia in May 1775, the atmosphere was charged with urgency. Delegates debated the colony's next move amid growing calls for armed resistance. George, characteristically reserved yet resolute, carefully weighed discussions, aware of the gravity of decisions they faced. His previous military experience, combined with his calm leadership and dignified presence, made him an immediate candidate for commanding the newly proposed Continental Army. John Adams eloquently nominated him, emphasizing George's proven courage, character, and dedication to American principles. Despite feeling deeply humbled by the nomination, Washington accepted with determination, pledging his life and honor to defend the colony's freedoms. Appointed Commander-in-Chief on June 15, 1775, George Washington faced an enormous task, transforming scattered colonial militias into a cohesive, disciplined army capable of confronting the well-trained British forces. Without delay, he traveled north to assume command of American forces besieging British troops occupying Boston. Along the journey, he considered the daunting challenge ahead, knowing the odds were heavily stacked against him and his inexperienced army. Washington arrived in Massachusetts in July 1775, greeted by a ragtag army that lacked organization, discipline, and sufficient supplies. However, he quickly asserted control, demonstrating his natural ability to inspire trust and impose order. George imposed strict discipline, improved training regimens, and tackled logistical problems head-on, gradually molding the disparate militias into a cohesive fighting force. Despite early frustrations, Washington's steady hand guided the Continental Army through initial setbacks. He fortified positions around Boston, striving to maintain morale among soldiers who struggled with harsh conditions and shortages of ammunition, food, and clothing. Through tireless effort and personal sacrifice, Washington gradually transformed his troops into a credible fighting force capable of standing against British regulars. In March 1776, George seized an opportunity to strike a decisive blow. Under cover of night, his forces placed artillery captured from Fort Ticonderoga onto Dorchester Heights, overlooking British-occupied Boston. The British commander, General William Howe, recognizing his untenable position, ordered a withdrawal. Washington's strategic maneuver forced the British evacuation of Boston, a major victory that significantly boosted morale across the colonies. This triumph at Boston validated Washington's leadership and bolstered colonial confidence. Yet he knew the struggle was far from over. The British Army would soon return, stronger and more determined. Prepared to face the enormous challenges ahead, George Washington stood resolute, determined to lead his fellow colonists toward independence. Following the victorious liberation of Boston, George Washington anticipated the struggle for independence was far from over. The colonies celebrated, yet Washington remained vigilant, aware of the looming challenges ahead. His attention shifted southward, where New York City became the next focal point of conflict as British forces regrouped, determined to quell the rebellion. In the summer of 1776, General Washington moved his newly formed Continental Army toward New York, knowing the British plan to seize this strategic port city. He understood its critical importance. Controlling New York would grant the British a strategic base from which they could dominate the colonies and threaten colonial unity. Despite the troops' recent success in Boston, George realized his army remained inexperienced and under-equipped. Washington confronted this new test with unyielding determination. Throughout the hot summer months, he fortified defensive positions around New York, diligently preparing for the inevitable British assault. In late August, British forces under General William Howe, supported by powerful naval reinforcements, launched a massive attack. The Battle of Long Island quickly turned disastrous for the Americans, forcing Washington into a precarious retreat across the East River to Manhattan. This retreat became an early lesson in strategic patience for Washington. He managed a skillful withdrawal under the cover of darkness and dense fog, preserving the Continental Army from complete annihilation. Though New York fell into British hands, George's leadership during the evacuation preserved his forces, enabling them to continue the fight. Washington learned that survival was sometimes more valuable than victory, understanding that the war for independence required endurance and adaptability. As winter approached in 1776, morale within the Continental Army plummeted. Soldiers faced harsh conditions, scarcity of provisions, and low spirits. Washington, keenly aware of this crisis, recognized the desperate need for a morale boost. Driven by sheer determination, he planned a daring and audacious operation, crossing the icy Delaware River to launch a surprise attack on Hessian troops stationed in Trenton, New Jersey. On Christmas night, 1776, George Washington led his exhausted and freezing troops across the perilous river. Amid brutal cold and icy currents, Washington's resolve never wavered. Arriving in Trenton at dawn, the surprise was total. The Continental forces overwhelmed the Hessians swiftly and decisively, capturing nearly 1,000 enemy soldiers. The victory at Trenton provided a desperately needed boost, reviving morale and rekindling hope throughout the colonies. Washington's resolve continued to strengthen in the face of immense difficulties. The Battle of Princeton, just days later, further reinforced the Americans' growing confidence. George knew these victories, though small in scale, significantly impacted the war's momentum. They demonstrated to Britain, and to the colonists themselves, that the American cause was far from lost. Through these trials, George Washington evolved into a symbol of steadfast defiance and unwavering resolve, inspiring colonists to stand firm in their quest for independence, no matter the cost. As the harsh winter of 1777 approached, George Washington faced perhaps his greatest challenge yet. After the brief triumphs at Trenton and Princeton, the Continental Army endured significant defeats, notably at Brandywine and Germantown. British forces captured Philadelphia, the American capital, forcing Congress to flee. Washington's troops, dispirited and worn, prepared for a harsh winter at Valley Forge, Pennsylvania. Valley Forge tested the limits of human endurance. Arriving in December 1777, Washington's soldiers faced bitter cold, disease, starvation, and inadequate shelter. Conditions were dire. Men lacked sufficient clothing, food, and medicine. Morale plummeted, and desertions increased. However, amid these bleak conditions, George Washington demonstrated remarkable resilience and leadership, working tirelessly to maintain the Army's morale and unity. Washington shared his soldiers' hardships, sleeping in the same cold tents, enduring the same sparse rations. His visible presence provided essential reassurance, reminding soldiers they were not alone in their struggle. George tirelessly petitioned Congress for aid, pleading for additional supplies and reinforcements, recognizing that their survival depended upon timely support and improved discipline. During this brutal winter, Washington made critical decisions that would forever shape the Army's future. He invited Baron Friedrich von Steuben, a seasoned Prussian military officer, to join them at Valley Forge. Von Steuben brought essential discipline and tactical training to the disorganized Continental forces, dramatically transforming their effectiveness. Under von Steuben's careful guidance, soldiers learned to maneuver, fight, and operate with newfound confidence and unity. Throughout this harsh season, Washington also faced political challenges. Criticism arose in Congress, questioning his ability and suitability to lead. Political rivals attempted to undermine his authority, arguing for his replacement. However, Washington's dignified composure, unwavering determination, and consistent presence among the troops earned him loyalty and respect, eventually silencing critics and reaffirming his indispensable role as commander-in-chief. By spring 1778, the Army emerged from Valley Forge fundamentally changed, stronger, disciplined, and ready to face the British anew. George Washington's leadership during this severe trial shaped the Continental Army's character, instilling enduring resilience. Soldiers who survived the brutal winter developed unshakable loyalty to their general, knowing he shared every hardship and sacrifice. This renewed strength soon faced its test in June 1778, at the Battle of Monmouth in New Jersey. Under the scorching summer sun, Washington's reorganized forces boldly engaged British troops. Despite the battle ending inconclusively, it demonstrated the Continental Army's newfound strength and ability to withstand direct combat against the British. George Washington, standing resolutely amid these tumultuous events, solidified his place as a leader capable of guiding his country through the storm of war. The harshness of Valley Forge had not broken him, it had fortified his resolve, equipping him to continue the relentless pursuit of independence. Following the exhausting trials of Valley Forge and the promising display of strength at Monmouth, George Washington continued navigating the complexities of war with unwavering determination. The Continental Army emerged stronger, demonstrating newfound discipline and resilience. However, the struggle for independence remained uncertain, as victory demanded sustained effort, strategic brilliance, and perseverance. As the war progressed into the late 1770s and early 1780s, Washington faced continuous shortages of men and supplies. He repeatedly petitioned Congress for additional support, tirelessly highlighting the needs of his soldiers. These efforts, though often frustrating, solidified his reputation as a compassionate leader deeply committed to the welfare of his troops. George understood clearly that morale and unity were essential to ultimate victory. Washington's strategy shifted toward a defensive approach, avoiding direct, large-scale confrontations while aiming to prolong the conflict, making it costly for British forces to sustain their distant war effort. His cautious tactics drew criticism from some quarters, yet they effectively prolonged the war, allowing American forces to gradually weaken British resolve. A crucial turning point arrived in 1781 when British General Cornwallis fortified his position at Yorktown, Virginia. Seizing this opportunity, Washington devised an ambitious and strategic plan. Collaborating closely with French allies, notably General Rochambeau and Admiral de Grasse, Washington coordinated a combined land and naval assault designed to trap and defeat Cornwallis's forces decisively. In late September 1781, American and French forces laid siege to Yorktown, effectively surrounding Cornwallis's army. Washington skillfully orchestrated operations, coordinating his continental troops with French allies both on land and at sea. After weeks of intense fighting and relentless bombardment, Cornwallis had no choice but to surrender on October 19, 1781. The victory at Yorktown became the decisive moment in the American Revolution, signaling the eventual triumph of American independence. Despite this monumental success, Washington remained cautious and humble, recognizing that the struggle was not yet entirely over. Peace negotiations began, but British forces still occupied major American cities, and uncertainty lingered. George maintained his command, ensuring readiness until final peace agreements could be secured. During this pivotal period, Washington also navigated personal challenges. His beloved stepson, John Parke Custis, tragically succumbed to illness contracted during the Yorktown campaign. This loss deeply affected George and Martha, reinforcing their bond yet casting a somber shadow over their victory. In 1783, with the Treaty of Paris officially ending hostilities and recognizing American independence, Washington returned once again to Mount Vernon. His humility and dedication shone brightly when he willingly resigned his military commission, a gesture unprecedented in history. By stepping away from power voluntarily, Washington affirmed his unwavering commitment to civilian governance and Republican values, astonishing the world. George Washington's courageous leadership, marked by integrity, strategic brilliance, and resilience, had successfully guided America through its darkest hours, solidifying his legacy as the father of his country. After the monumental triumph at Yorktown and the signing of the Treaty of Paris in 1783, George Washington eagerly embraced a return to civilian life. He approached his homecoming at Mount Vernon with relief, yet also with a deep sense of responsibility. America had achieved independence, but the young nation faced immense challenges in shaping its future. Washington's return to Mount Vernon marked a significant transition. The military commander once again became a dedicated planter, determined to repair the estate's fortunes, which had declined during his long absences. Under his careful stewardship, Mount Vernon experienced rapid rejuvenation. George introduced innovative farming practices, including crop rotation and experimentation with new plant varieties, significantly boosting productivity. While he enjoyed his return to a peaceful routine, Washington remained deeply involved in the broader affairs of his young nation. Visitors frequently journeyed to Mount Vernon, eager for counsel and guidance. George's home became a vital center of political discourse, where influential figures exchanged ideas and debated the direction of the United States. His opinion carried immense weight, influencing discussions on governance, economic policy, and national unity. During this period, Washington increasingly concerned himself with the weak national government under the Articles of Confederation. He observed how ineffective the decentralized system was in addressing economic turmoil, interstate disputes, and foreign relations. Recognizing the necessity for change, George supported the call for a stronger, more cohesive federal government to preserve the unity and stability of the fledgling nation. In 1786, Shays' Rebellion further exposed the fragility of the new American government. Farmers in Massachusetts rebelled against oppressive economic conditions and perceived governmental neglect. The uprising deeply troubled Washington, underscoring his belief that a stronger central authority was essential to prevent chaos and protect the Republic. Responding to mounting pressures, Washington agreed to attend the Constitutional Convention in Philadelphia in 1787, lending his credibility and prestige to the monumental task ahead. Elected unanimously as the convention's president, George presided over intense debates, mediating disputes between delegates and maintaining order amid heated discussions. His quiet authority helped guide delegates toward compromise and consensus. Though rarely engaging directly in debate, Washington's presence profoundly influenced the convention's proceedings. His unwavering commitment to unity and compromise set a tone of cooperation and constructive dialogue. The resulting Constitution, though imperfect, was a testament to Washington's guiding hand, reflecting principles he had advocated for years: a strong federal government balanced by clear limits to prevent tyranny. Returning again to Mount Vernon after the Constitution's signing, Washington hoped to finally retire permanently from public service. However, the nation had other plans. As the Constitution awaited ratification, citizens looked to George with anticipation, envisioning him as the first leader of the United States under the new framework. Washington faced a profound decision. Would he remain comfortably in private life, or would he heed the call of duty once more, stepping forward to lead the nation he had fought tirelessly to create? Despite his genuine desire to enjoy retirement at Mount Vernon, George Washington recognized the immense responsibility resting upon his shoulders. In 1789, following the ratification of the new Constitution, Washington received the unanimous vote of the Electoral College, becoming the first President of the United States. His acceptance of this role was driven by duty, not ambition, as he once again put personal preference aside for the good of the nation. On April 30, 1789, Washington stood on the balcony of Federal Hall in New York City, taking the presidential oath before an eager and hopeful crowd. This moment marked not just the beginning of his presidency but the birth of a new government unlike any other in history. As he solemnly swore to preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution, George set a standard for presidential conduct: humble yet dignified, decisive yet cautious. Washington immediately understood the gravity of his role. His actions would define precedents for future presidents and shape the new republic's identity. He appointed a balanced cabinet, selecting brilliant minds such as Alexander Hamilton as Secretary of the Treasury and Thomas Jefferson as Secretary of State. Washington intentionally surrounded himself with diverse perspectives, hoping vigorous debates would lead to sound policies and lasting solutions. Economic stability became Washington's first priority. Supporting Hamilton's ambitious financial policies, he sought to stabilize the nation's finances through the establishment of a national bank, assumption of state debts, and implementation of tariffs and taxes. These controversial measures sparked significant political debates, yet Washington firmly believed they were essential for America's future prosperity and independence. Another critical challenge was maintaining neutrality amid international conflicts. With Britain and France locked in warfare during the French Revolution, Washington carefully navigated foreign policy, determined to keep the fledgling nation out of entanglements that could jeopardize its fragile unity. In 1793, he issued the Neutrality Proclamation, firmly asserting America's right to remain neutral, despite pressure from factions advocating alliance with either Britain or France. Washington's presidency faced internal turmoil as well. Domestic unrest erupted in the Whiskey Rebellion of 1794, as farmers in western Pennsylvania protested against a federal tax on distilled spirits. Washington decisively quelled the rebellion, leading militia forces personally to enforce federal authority. This action demonstrated the strength and resolve of the federal government under the new Constitution, reinforcing the legitimacy and authority of the presidency. Throughout his presidency, Washington remained acutely aware of his role in shaping a legacy of governance. Mindful of the dangers of unchecked power, he voluntarily chose not to seek a third term, establishing a critical precedent for peaceful transfers of power. His farewell address, delivered in 1796, emphasized unity, warned against divisive political parties, and advocated cautious involvement in foreign affairs. As George Washington departed office, he left behind a nation significantly strengthened by his thoughtful leadership. His presidency set foundational examples, profoundly influencing the character and direction of American democracy for generations to come. In March 1797, George Washington returned to Mount Vernon, looking forward to peaceful retirement after 8 years of intense presidential duties. However, retirement did not signal detachment from national affairs. Washington remained deeply concerned about America's future, closely following political developments from his Virginia home. Although no longer president, his advice and perspective were continually sought by leaders and citizens alike. Mount Vernon again became his primary focus, yet Washington faced significant personal and financial challenges. Years of public service had strained his finances, and the plantation required extensive care and investment. Undeterred, George once more employed innovative farming practices, steadily improving productivity. His daily routines included managing detailed plantation operations and pursuing agricultural experiments, hoping to set a progressive example for American farming practices. Throughout his retirement, Washington was deeply troubled by political divisions emerging within the nation. The growing feud between Federalists, led by Hamilton, and Republicans, led by Jefferson, worried him deeply. Washington consistently advocated national unity, urging compromise and cooperation. He was distressed that partisan politics threatened to undermine the very foundation he worked so diligently to establish. The challenges to national unity became more evident during the Quasi-War with France, a period marked by diplomatic tensions and naval skirmishes. In 1798, President John Adams called upon Washington once more, requesting his leadership as Commander-in-Chief of the Provisional Army. Although aging and yearning for peace, Washington accepted, motivated again by his unwavering sense of duty. He organized preparations diligently, though open warfare was ultimately avoided. Washington's final years were a blend of personal reflection, domestic management, and political concern. He continued refining his beloved estate, innovating agricultural practices, and experimenting with new farming methods. Martha and George hosted family gatherings, providing a warm and welcoming home, though always aware of the country's uncertain future. Tragically, George Washington's health declined rapidly in December 1799 after catching a severe throat infection. Despite receiving medical attention, his condition deteriorated quickly. On December 14, 1799, George Washington passed away at Mount Vernon, leaving a profound void felt throughout the nation. News of his passing sent shockwaves across America, evoking widespread mourning and reflection. George Washington's death marked not just the loss of a beloved leader, but symbolized the end of an era. His funeral drew thousands, and tributes poured in from across the country and around the world, honoring his unwavering dedication to liberty and unity. In life and death, George Washington embodied American values: resilience, sacrifice, integrity, and humility. His legacy endured far beyond his lifetime, shaping the American ethos. Washington left behind more than a thriving plantation or esteemed military record. He left a vision, a legacy deeply etched into the heart of a nation, forever guiding America toward its principles of freedom, unity, and democracy. The passing of George Washington on December 14, 1799, plunged America into profound grief. News of his death spread swiftly, reaching distant corners of the country and eliciting heartfelt sorrow from citizens of all backgrounds. For many, Washington was more than just a leader. He embodied the spirit and aspirations of a nation he had helped forge. Across towns and cities, bells tolled mournfully, and memorial services drew thousands of grieving Americans. Eulogies praised Washington's integrity, courage, and unparalleled dedication to the nation's welfare. Congress officially declared a period of mourning, reflecting the widespread sentiment that America had lost not only its first president, but a guiding symbol of unity and honor. At Mount Vernon, Martha Washington endured profound personal grief, mourning the loss of her husband of over 40 years. Their relationship had been built upon mutual respect and affection, providing George stability and comfort amid years of intense public service. His death left Martha profoundly bereaved, surrounded by the support of family, friends, and the nation. Washington's legacy immediately sparked reflection across the country. Newspapers highlighted his life story, reminding readers of his humble beginnings, steadfast leadership during the Revolutionary War, and measured governance as the first president. These accounts solidified his image as the father of his country, an embodiment of American values that citizens sought to emulate. The mourning also resonated internationally, particularly in Europe, where Washington had earned respect as a formidable opponent of British power. Leaders from France, Britain, and elsewhere paid tribute, recognizing his critical role in shaping a new nation and influencing global ideals of democracy and freedom. Back at Mount Vernon, Washington's will further emphasized his commitment to American ideals. Remarkably, George chose to free the enslaved people under his ownership upon Martha's death, a decision reflective of his evolving views on slavery and a hope that America would someday overcome this moral contradiction. Though far from perfect, this decision underscored Washington's complicated legacy, prompting ongoing debates about liberty and human rights in the young republic. Washington's funeral, held at Mount Vernon, was marked by solemnity and reverence. Thousands of mourners attended, silently paying respects as his coffin was laid to rest in the family tomb. The peaceful surroundings of his cherished estate seemed fitting, a final resting place for a man whose life had been devoted to the relentless pursuit of peace and prosperity for his fellow Americans. George Washington's departure deeply affected the nation, yet it solidified his place as an enduring symbol. His life became a blueprint for future American leaders, illustrating the values essential for leadership: courage, humility, sacrifice, and unwavering devotion to the common good. Even in death, George Washington continued to guide America, reminding its citizens of the virtues essential for unity and independence. The first president's passing marked a profound moment of reflection, reinforcing his status not merely as a historical figure, but as a timeless symbol of the nation's ideals and aspirations. After George Washington's passing, the United States faced numerous internal and external challenges, testing the strength of the young republic he had helped establish. His legacy, however, remained an unwavering beacon guiding the nation through uncertainty and turmoil. Washington's leadership during America's formative years created a solid foundation that future generations could build upon. The early 1800s saw growing political divisions between Federalists and Democratic Republicans. Washington's previous warnings about the dangers of partisan politics resonated deeply during this tumultuous period. His words encouraged citizens to place national unity above party loyalty, emphasizing that lasting strength and freedom depended on cooperation rather than division. As conflicts intensified domestically, Washington's earlier foreign policy principles of neutrality and cautious diplomacy also guided America's early international relations. Amid escalating tensions with European powers, notably during the War of 1812 against Britain, Washington's doctrine of neutrality helped shape American diplomatic strategy, ensuring the young nation navigated its geopolitical struggles carefully. Mount Vernon, meanwhile, became a symbol of American heritage, drawing countless visitors eager to pay respects and learn about their nation's first leader. George Washington's estate and legacy inspired subsequent generations to uphold the values he championed: honesty, responsibility, and a firm commitment to liberty and justice. His successors, particularly Presidents John Adams, Thomas Jefferson, and James Madison, grappled with challenges George had anticipated. Each leader, in their unique ways, drew upon Washington's examples and principles as guiding lights during their own presidencies. Washington's vision of a unified, prosperous America continued to influence policy debates and political actions long after his departure. During this period, Americans faced continued threats from international conflicts and internal divisions, testing the resilience of their young democracy. Washington's example provided stability, reminding leaders and citizens alike of the sacrifices and resolve needed to sustain independence. His legacy offered a blueprint for navigating complex challenges, emphasizing patience, perseverance, and unity. In 1814, during the War of 1812, British troops invaded Washington, D.C., burning public buildings including the White House and the Capitol. Despite this devastating attack, the nation's resilience, inspired by Washington's earlier sacrifices, quickly became evident. Americans rallied around their collective heritage, determined to defend the independence George Washington had fought so diligently to achieve. As decades passed, Washington's name and image became firmly embedded within America's national identity. Monuments, towns, and institutions bearing his name were established across the country, permanently linking him with American culture and ideals. His life story was passed down through generations, providing an inspiring example of leadership and selflessness. George Washington's enduring legacy continued to provide strength, reminding Americans of the values essential for sustaining their democracy. He was more than just the nation's first president, he was an enduring symbol of unity and perseverance, guiding America through challenges and ensuring its continual growth as a beacon of freedom for future generations. In the decades following George Washington's death, his profound influence continued shaping America's growth, both culturally and politically. As the nation expanded westward, settlers carried with them the ideals and values that Washington had embodied: integrity, resilience, and a dedication to liberty and justice. His legacy served as a guiding light, inspiring Americans to face challenges with determination and unity. By the mid-1800s, George Washington had firmly established himself as a symbol of American virtue. Schoolchildren learned stories of his honesty, bravery, and humility, fostering a shared sense of national identity across diverse communities. Washington's image adorned public spaces, currency, and national symbols, reflecting his central role in America's founding mythology. Mount Vernon increasingly became a site of national pilgrimage. Visitors from all walks of life journeyed to Washington's beloved estate, seeking a tangible connection to their nation's origins. They walked through rooms preserved just as Washington had left them, marveling at the simplicity and dignity of a leader who prioritized duty above personal ambition. The impact of Washington's example was particularly evident during the Civil War, as the nation he had worked tirelessly to unify fractured over slavery and state rights. Both sides invoked Washington's legacy, claiming to defend the principles he represented. Abraham Lincoln, especially, drew inspiration from Washington's resilience and wisdom, frequently referencing him in speeches to unify a divided nation. During Reconstruction, Washington's legacy provided an aspirational framework for rebuilding national unity. Leaders looked to his example when navigating the difficult path toward reconciliation and healing. His legacy emphasized forgiveness, humility, and cooperation, values critical to restoring a fractured nation. Washington's principles also influenced America's evolving political landscape. His warnings about foreign entanglements guided America's cautious approach to international affairs for generations. Though tested by global conflicts, including World War I and II, his advice shaped diplomatic strategies, emphasizing careful engagement to protect national sovereignty and interests. In the early 20th century, as America faced rapid industrialization and societal shifts, Washington's values of integrity, sacrifice, and civic responsibility remained crucial. He became a symbol of stability and continuity amid significant changes. His life story continued inspiring individuals to serve their communities and nation with dedication and honor. Monuments dedicated to George Washington rose prominently across the country. The Washington Monument in the nation's capital, completed in 1884, stood as a towering testament to his enduring significance. Countless schools, universities, and institutions bore his name, further cementing his legacy within American culture. George Washington's enduring impact continued shaping America's national identity, providing moral clarity and guidance. His legacy was a reminder of the nation's potential and a challenge to future generations to embody his timeless virtues. As America faced new challenges, Washington's example remained a powerful reminder of the strength derived from unity, sacrifice, and steadfast commitment to freedom. As the 20th century progressed, George Washington's legacy remained firmly embedded in the fabric of American society. His life and principles continued to serve as a guiding force, shaping the nation's identity and values through times of triumph and hardship. Political leaders, educators, and citizens alike drew upon his wisdom, finding in Washington an enduring model of selfless leadership and national unity. During the Great Depression of the 1930s, when America faced unprecedented economic turmoil, Washington's legacy provided hope and reassurance. His resilience during the Revolutionary War and the uncertain early years of the Republic reminded Americans that adversity could be overcome with perseverance, courage, and collective determination. President Franklin D. Roosevelt often referenced Washington's leadership, urging the nation to stand firm in the face of hardship and to remain steadfast in their faith and democratic principles. Washington's influence extended into World War II, as the United States found itself engaged in a global struggle for freedom. Military leaders invoked his strategies of perseverance and discipline, reminding soldiers of the sacrifices made by the first commander-in-chief to secure independence. His leadership became a source of inspiration, reinforcing the idea that America's strength lay in its commitment to unity and democratic ideals. As the Cold War era unfolded, Washington's warnings against foreign entanglements took on renewed significance. His farewell address, which cautioned against permanent alliances and partisan divisions, became a cornerstone of American foreign policy discussions. Leaders from both political parties cited Washington's wisdom when navigating diplomatic relationships, using his principles to balance national security interests with the nation's long-standing commitment to peace and self-determination. The civil rights movement of the 1950s and 1960s further demonstrated Washington's lasting relevance. Advocates for equality and justice saw in him a leader who had fought for the ideals of liberty and self-governance. Although Washington was a product of his time, his own evolving views on slavery and his decision to free his enslaved people upon Martha's death resonated with those striving for progress and a more just society. His belief in the necessity of a strong but fair government reinforced the movement's calls for legislation that would protect civil rights and uphold the founding ideals of the nation. Even in the 21st century, Washington's legacy remains deeply ingrained in the American consciousness. His name and image continue to be synonymous with integrity, duty, and leadership. Every presidential inauguration echoes the precedent he set, reminding each incoming leader of the weight of responsibility Washington carried as the first president of the United States. His example continues to challenge leaders to act with wisdom, humility, and a commitment to the greater good. As new generations face their own challenges, political division, global conflicts, economic struggles, Washington's legacy endures as a reminder of what is possible when unity, perseverance, and a dedication to democratic values prevail. His life was not one of perfection, but of purpose, and it remains a beacon for all who seek to lead and serve their country with honor. As time marches forward, George Washington's legacy continues to shape the ideals and aspirations of the United States. His influence extends beyond his era, reminding Americans of the virtues of leadership, integrity, and service to the nation. From the Revolutionary War to the modern era, Washington remains the unshakable foundation upon which the country's democratic experiment stands. The preservation of Washington's legacy has been a national priority. His home, Mount Vernon, remains one of the most visited historical sites in the United States, maintained as a tribute to his life and service. Scholars, historians, and political leaders continuously study his writings, speeches, and actions, seeking insights into his wisdom and leadership. The principles he outlined in his farewell address, unity, caution in foreign alliances, and the dangers of partisan divisions, remain subjects of reflection and debate in every generation. Washington's impact is also evident in the physical symbols of American democracy. The nation's capital bears his name, a testament to his unparalleled contributions. The towering Washington Monument, standing at the heart of the National Mall, serves as a reminder of his towering influence on the nation's development. His likeness is immortalized on Mount Rushmore, alongside other leaders who carried forth his vision of a united and free nation. Perhaps Washington's greatest legacy is the example he set for leadership. Unlike monarchs or dictators who clung to power, Washington voluntarily relinquished his command after the Revolutionary War and stepped down after 2 presidential terms, reinforcing the democratic principle of peaceful transitions of power. His humility and self-restraint laid the foundation for American governance, ensuring that no single individual would hold absolute authority. As the United States evolves, Washington's legacy continues to inspire leaders and citizens alike. His name is invoked during moments of national crisis, reminding the country of the strength found in unity and perseverance. His character, marked by both ambition and humility, serves as an enduring benchmark for those who seek to lead with honor and wisdom. Education systems across the country continue to teach young generations about Washington's life, ensuring that his contributions remain firmly embedded in the national consciousness. Through books, films, and scholarly works, his story is retold, not as an outdated history lesson, but as a living testament to the values that define the United States. Though centuries have passed since his time, George Washington remains more than a historical figure. He is a symbol of what America strives to be. His leadership, sacrifices, and unwavering commitment to democracy serve as a guiding light, reminding each generation of the responsibility they bear in preserving the ideals of freedom and justice. As long as the United States endures, the legacy of George Washington will remain, standing as a reminder of the power of selfless leadership and the enduring strength of a nation founded on principles of liberty and unity.